Okay, to start this series on using Packet Tracer, we're going to be configuring Inter-VLAN routing. I have a little window open on the bottom right where I can take notes and do a little pre-planning before I start configuring anything. So this is going to be on Inter-VLAN routing. And I want to know first what devices I'm going to need in order to set this up. So for my devices, I'm going to be using one router, one switch, and two PCs. Then, since this is inter-VLAN routing and we are looking at VLANs, I want to know which VLANs I'm using. So for my VLANs, I want VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 for the two different computers. And since I'm configuring VLANs, I need to know what networks they're going to be referring to. So what IP space, and I'm going to use the 192.168.10 network for VLAN 10 and the 192.168.20 network for VLAN 20. Okay. And also, I want to know what this is going to look like before I actually start dragging the devices into Packet Tracer. Since this is inter-VLAN routing, these are VLANs that are going to exist behind the router, the gateway, the main router. So I'm going to draw that one router on top, and then I have a switch connecting to the router where the VLANs are going to exist. And then from the switch are going to be the two computers. Okay, so this is going to be computer 1, computer 2, this is the switch, this is the router, and VLAN 1, or I'm sorry, computer 1 is going to belong to VLAN 10, and computer 2 is going to belong to VLAN 20. Since these are the 192.168.10 network and 20 network, computer 1 is going to get the first usable IP address, which is 192.168.10.1, and same thing for computer 2, 192.168.20.1. Okay, the VLANs need to exist on the switch, so we have VLAN 10 and VLAN 20 here. And for the router, it's going to be the gateway for both of these networks, so it's going to need IP addresses on its interface. 192.168.10.254, the last usable I like to use, and 192.168.20.254. Okay. And since we're using a router for this, as opposed to a multi-layer switch, we're going to have to configure sub interfaces. And then on the switch, we'll configure a trunk port going up to the router and access ports going down to the computers. So let's go ahead and drag some of these devices now. I'm just going to use any router and any switch. I have a 2811 for the router, and for the switch, I'm just going to drag a 2960, and then two laptops. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this really quick to be RTR1 for router 1, switch 1, and then I'm going to have PC1 and PC2. Okay, and just like I drew it out, I'm going to connect these. So I have F00 for the router going down to, let's just connect it to F01, and then from F02 to PC1 and F03 to PC2. And the first thing I'm going to configure is the switch in this case. It will be the easiest to configure, so we'll take a look at that first. Alright, so in the switch, and I'm not going to worry about some of the basics like host name, banner, domain name. We're just going to focus on inter-VLAN routing. So let's go to global, config T, and first let's create the two VLANs. So if I do show VLAN brief, looking at my VLAN database, all I have is the default VLAN 1 and the legacy VLANs 1002, 3, 4, and 5. So I need to add VLAN 20 and VLAN 10 to the database. And you do that just by typing VLAN 10 and then type VLAN 20. Now if I do show VLAN brief, I should see 10 and 20 exist now in the database. If I look at the right, I see that there's no ports attached or added to this VLAN. So they exist, but they're not doing anything just yet. So then what I need to do is for F02 and F03, I need to make them access ports for that VLAN. So I'm going to type switch port mode access, and then switch port access VLAN 10 for F02. And you'll see the light turn orange. It's going to turn it green again. And then for F03, which goes to PC2, I needed to access VLAN 20. So switch port mode access and switch port access VLAN 20. Okay, so now the VLANs exist within the switch and the ports are assigned to the VLANs. So any traffic going into F02 will go into VLAN 10. Now we need both these VLANs to go up to the router to traverse the same link, so that link is going to have to be a trunk port. So interface F01, and I'm going to type switch port mode trunk for this case. Now it's still red because the port is shut down on router 1, so we'll have to go to router 1 and no shut that port for it to turn green. So that's basically it for the switch, is to get the VLANs assigned to the ports and to create a trunk for the uplink. So if I show run, we should see that F01 is a mode trunk, and then F02 is access VLAN 10, and F03 is access VLAN 20. Alright, pretty simple so far. Let's go to first, before I go to the router, I'm going to go ahead and configure the IPv4 settings for the computers. So PC1, we were using the 10 network and the first IP address. So 192.168.10.1 automatically assigned to the /24, and the default gateway is going to be the last IP address, .10.254. Okay, that's all you have to do. If I go to the command prompt, I type ipconfig, and we see that it's been assigned to 10.1 and gateway is 254. And let's go to PC2. Let's configure it for 192.168.20.1, and gateway is going to be 20.254. Again, if I type ipconfig, I'll see that it's been assigned to 20.1 and 20.254 for the gateway. Now, just because we have the VLANs created on switch 1 doesn't mean that these computers can now communicate to each other, because there is no routing in between the two different networks just yet. PC2 can only talk to computers that are on the same network and logically on the same VLAN through the switch. So if I try to ping PC1, it will fail. and we'll see that the request just times out. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump into the router now so that we can make this work. Go to global, and first thing to do is unshut the port. So if I do show IP interface brief, I see I have interface F00, interface F01. I'm using F00, and we also see that it's administratively shut down. So interface F00, no shut, we'll see that it turns green. And basically for this port, I do show run, we'll see that F00 is just unassigned with no IP address, and it's been no shut, so it's turned on. All we need to do is unshut it for now, and then we're going to create our sub interfaces for F00 for the two different VLANs. And that's because we are trunking from the switch up to the router. So I'm going to leave it unshut, and then I'm going to interface F00.10. It's going to create a new interface for us, and then I want to encapsulate the .1Q protocol, which is for trunking VLANs, and the VLAN tag that's going to go along with it. Once I do that, it'll allow me to assign an IP address to that interface, and that's going to be the 254/24. Okay, so if I take a look at it now, we'll see there's F00 still unassigned with no IP address on it, but now we have F00.10 that's been tagged for VLAN 10, and it has the IP address acting as the gateway. So if I jump back to PC1, I should be able to ping the gateway now, 192.168.10.254. It'll, yep, right away we get replies from the router going back to PC1. And the flow of traffic for PC1 to ping PC2 will have to go through the router, because that's where we're going to change networks. It's not going to happen through the switch. So all traffic going from PC1 will go up to the switch, up to the router. It'll change networks, go back down to the switch, and then back to PC2. Okay, so we still can't ping from PC1 to PC2 because we haven't configured the gateway for VLAN 20 yet. So on PC1, if I try to ping now 192.168.20.1, it'll still say destination host unreachable. Now it won't say request timed out because the traffic can reach the gateway. And so this is a reply from the gateway, 10.254, destination host unreachable. So that's the router telling the computer that that destination can't be reached because it's not in its routing table. And now if I couldn't reach the gateway, then we would get request timed out because the traffic leaves the computer and no replies ever come back. This is a reply, so we get this message. So back to router 1, let's finish configuring the interface. So we're going to create another interface, F00 again, but this will be .20. And encapsulation .1Q again, except we'll tag it for 20 now. And we'll give it the IP address for VLAN 20, which is 192.168.20.254/24. And that should be it. So show run, and I'll see now the interfaces for F00 unassigned. F00.10 has an IP address, and F00.20 has an IP address. Now looking at the routing table, show IP route, we can see now that the 10 network exists in the router and the 20 network exists in the router. And it's /24. The local IP address is 10.254, and the other local is 20.254. And we'll see that this is connected to the 00.10 interface, and the 20 network is connected to F00.20 interface. So now logically our networks are separated into VLAN 10 and VLAN 20, and we have full connectivity now between the two different VLANs. So the router should be able to ping both computers. It'll be able to ping 192.168.10.1, and it'll be able to ping 20.1. Okay, that proves connectivity from the computers to the router. Last thing we have to do is prove connectivity between computer to computer. So going back to PC 1, last attempt that I tried to ping computer 2 was a fail. So we'll do it again now. Oops. Alright, trying to ping 20.1, and now we get replies. So just to look at the flow of traffic again, using Packet Tracer's simulation mode, let me go back to PC1 and ping PC2 again. Alright, we see the packet. It goes up to switch 1. Right now it exists on VLAN 10. It enters switch 1 on VLAN 10 through its access port. And now this is headed to the gateway so that it can get to VLAN 20 or the 20 network. So it goes up through the trunk port to the gateway. Router 1 sees traffic incoming from the 10 network, and it's headed to the 20 network, so it sends it back out through F00.20 to switch 1. Switch 1 receives it on the trunk, sees that it's going to the 20 network to PC2, so it sends to PC2. Now PC2 sees the traffic coming from the 10 network and wants to reply to that, and the only way that it can get to the 10 network is back through the gateway. So it sends it back up through switch 1, through VLAN 20, up through the trunk. Router 1 sees it coming from 20 network, going to 10 network, sends it back down to switch 1, and back to PC1. And that's how we have connectivity between both computers. Alright, and that is how we configure inter-VLAN routing.